do we hear a family fight for freedom through 3 generations. This is the Tañada family. Through the dark days of martial law, they fought for what they thought was right. First, it was Senator Lorenzo Tañada, then it was his son, former Senator Wigberto Tañada, and now Congressman Lorenzo Erin Tañada III. What inspired them to fight for freedom, keeping their faith in the Filipinos? Joining us tonight is Congressman Erin Tañada. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Angel.
So would you share to us tonight, how were you raised by your grandfather down to your father?
Well, like any other normal family, but of course the family unit was very close. Outside of the family unit, it was not the same, and you would always see that there were guests, there were visitors that would come visit my grandfather whenever we would have reunions, and we have reunions quite often for a family. Let's say when my grandfather was still alive, every 2 Sundays we would have a reunion with all the siblings of my father and all my cousins, and it's not a small family. I have 47 first cousins.
Wow. It's a quite huge family.
Yes, and I remember during martial law period, there was a time that material coming from the United States, because since the press was muzzled during martial law, any news about the opposition, whether it comes from the United States or whatever plans they were having, would be brought to the country by friends. Whether there were some books that would be considered banned here, they would be brought in, and we would be sharing it among ourselves. And at a very young age, I got to read the book of Primitivo Mijares, who used to be the executive secretary of President Marcos. This is the conjugal dictatorship of Ferdinand Imelda Marcos.
So having said all that, how did you grow up? How did your grandfather mold you? Do you see yourself as a revolutionary also?
well, my grandfather was not a revolutionary. He just stood up for the people who were tortured, who were arrested, who were not allowed to exercise their rights. And since we were exposed to this, especially with regard to the people that would visit him,
right.
Then you start to question, you start asking yourselves, why is this so? And maybe my initiation to political street activity happened in 1978, when there was the IBP elections, where Senator Ninoy Aquino ran with 20 other members of parliament, so-called, and they put up a good fight. The effects of martial law were lifted for 45 days, and so people would be listening to speeches coming from these 21 candidates, of course, except from Senator Ninoy,
yes,
who was under arrest at Fort Bonifacio, but he was represented by then Corazon Aquino or Chris Aquino whenever there would be a rally wherever here in Manila.
Right, you were saying your grandfather was not a revolutionary, but he was known as a graft buster, a crusader of various causes. Were you inspired by this?
Well, let's put it this way. When he was at his heyday as a senator, I was not even in the minds of my father and mother.
Right.
He started in the Senate in 1947. He retired in 1971. I don't know if it was a premonition, because in 1972 martial law was declared, and so I really just got to know more about my grandfather at a later age, when he started representing political detainees, workers, farmers, students, the political opposition. That's why he was called the grand old man of the opposition. Whenever he would call a meeting, all sectors would come, no matter what political persuasion they may be, because he held that stature. And so at the later stages, as the movement grew bigger, then I got to see the causes that he was fighting for.
Though you came to know him at a very young age, Did it always inspire you to follow his footsteps? Did you always want to follow his footsteps? Or even your father's?
Well, once you're exposed to a certain environment, wanting to fight for change, wanting to fight for freedom, wanting to fight for democracy, would start to get ingrained into your mindset, and so you start asking questions. Why is this happening?
Yeah.
What is really the essence of being free? What is the essence of what does democracy mean when you can't even have a free and fair elections? So slowly you try to inculcate this and try to act in your own way. And as I got into college, I joined organizations, not necessarily only in the Ateneo, but also outside of the campus, and later on helped spearhead some of them when I became a student leader.
What lessons have you learned?
Lessons that I've learned, well, that freedom is supposed to be cherished, that democracy should always, we should always remember to respect each other's view. That it doesn't mean that if we do not agree with one particular view that we should silence him. He has every right to speak it out, and so there has to be more tolerance to understand the different views from other people.
Aside from tolerance, Congressman, what other values have you learned along the way that you see right now?
Well, people's participation plays a very important role. I think that is the essence also of this administration, President Noyes, and this is the reason why it echoes right now. People look for good governance, look at accountability, look at transparency, and they know that if this is embedded in the different agencies and even in national government, then the trust of the people will come back. And this is the importance of having a vibrant democracy, having the people participate in governance.
It's the same lesson we see now that we remember 40 years from the time of martial law.
Yes, I think the question that should always, 40 years ago, do we still remember or did we forget? And I think these questions always have to be asked, especially for the youth. And I think it is a challenge for the leaders of today to always remind the youth that what they're experiencing now was never experienced during the time of our youth.
Congressman, you're on the third generation. Usually people would say it's either the third generation would either usually make or break it. What do you think of this?
Well, I think I still made it. I'm ending my term as Congressman of the 4th District of Quezon Province. I think I made my grandfather proud. Today is the 40th remembrance of martial law, and we've passed. I've authored very key pieces of legislation. As a matter of fact, one piece of legislation was ratified by both chambers yesterday. This is the bill on enforced disappearances. If you remember, during the time of martial law, many activists, whether farmers, students, workers, professionals, were picked up and never to be seen again. And sad to say, it happened. It still happens up to this certain point. And so this piece of legislation is very important, and there are other pieces of legislation. It was mentioned earlier by Casatur and Teddy, the compensation bill. I've worked hard for that during my second term, and also in this 15th Congress, and hopefully the Senate will be able to act. The victims of martial law are not getting young.
All right, Congressman, we would love to talk more about that, but lastly, very quickly, any final words?
Well, like I said, we should never forget. And the leaders of today, especially those who have experienced martial law, should continue to educate the youth.
All right. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your time with us here on NewsLife. That was Congressman Lorenzo Erin Tañada III.